Welcome to Northlandia, a place to bring you curiosity because here you'll find curiosities. I'm Wyatt Buckner of the Duluth News Tribune, and I will be your guide as we discover the unique and fascinating stories here in the Northland. Here we celebrate the region's distinctive people, places, and history. In this episode, we explore the stone fortress of Douglas County. Let's venture forth into Northlandia. Here to guide us through what we've previously in the office have referred to as the bunker house is reporter Jimmy Lovrien. Jimmy, it's great to have you here again.
Thank you, Wyatt. It is good to be here.
And this is actually our first Northlandia with the two of us in a while. We actually went on location.
Yeah, right.
There's a video associated with this one, so this is a fun little adventure. And we had Jed Carlson, photographer, with us, so it was a whole visual reporting team this time around.
If you want to be immersed in the house, check it out at duluthnewstribune.news.
Specifically a bunker house of sorts.
It's a pretty unique place.
Bunker house slash, we end up dubbing it a stone fortress, because we'll just get right into it a little bit here. With our experience of driving up to this property, I'll let you get more into like what is this property exactly in a moment. But going into it, especially Jed and I, we're just going off the description of a bunker house. But you pull up to this dead end, in the end of this long road here, and it literally looks like a stone fortress of like walls and levels of like stone. And then eventually coming around, you find the building. Like, it's a fortress. It's built for defense.
Right. It is like you're driving down that dead end road, and at the end of the road is like several tiers of retaining wall made out of rock stacked there. And then there's a for sale sign there. And then you pull around the other side of it and you come across a house, there's a house built into that hill that retaining wall is kind of carved up. And it's using the same rock that those retaining walls are for the entire house. And then kind of the lawn kind of turns into the roof. So it's like it's a slanted concrete, rubber over concrete roof with grass planted on top. So it's unclear where the roof stops and the yard begins. There's
also there's a bridge with looked like blasted out like chasm of sorts,
right? Like a little courtyard within it all that it's, again, is walled with this rock that they have from on site, like mainly from setting off dynamite to get a hole for this whole house. They use that rock, I guess, probably from elsewhere on property if they needed it as well. But yeah, it's like all this rock is just stuff they blasted and then used for walls of the house and retaining walls everywhere.
And listeners, our description is not quite doing it justice. No. So if you're really curious, we encourage you to check out the article. It's got all the photos from Jed, including a couple aerial photos from myself, and then some video as well, just showing the uniqueness of this property, because it really took us by surprise. It really does feel kind of like a fortress of sorts. It's even like, you get past that for sale sign, there's like stone stairs like leading up on the side as well. Like, it's an interesting property. You honestly could not tell there's a house there.
No,
like,
from space you would not notice. I mean, they have an 8-car garage that doesn't have grass planted on the roof right next to it, but the house itself, which is, he said, almost 8,000 square feet, that's all covered in grass. And so if you were to look directly down, I mean, I guess you'd think there was like a park with some walls maybe or something, but yeah, it's camouflaged kind of in there. And it's not like I don't know, if you think of bunker, you think of dark, dingy, wartime, whatever. This is pretty nice. I mean, it's dated, but it's a cool, well-built, solid, for sure, solid house that, has 3 units, each with 3 bedrooms, each with a bathroom and kitchen. Yeah, and then some common space too. So it's not a small home. It took a few years for them to build, I understand, but it's pretty cool.
All right, now going back, how did you hear about this place to begin with?
Right. So a few months ago, probably back in March, our managing editor, Katie Roman, sent a TikTok to I think it must have been our Northlandia group on Slack, our instant messaging thing, and was like, this is a Northlandia, and it's this TikTok by Hometastrophes is the account, and this woman goes through Zillow and other listings into really unique properties and makes a video out of them, because there are some wild houses that hit the market throughout the country. Right, or anywhere. And so that's
even
kind
locally,
of
there's a couple.
Right, exactly.
This being one of them.
Yeah, and then there's another bunker house that we've I don't know if we've written about or other people have written about, not far away from this one too. Anyway, but that has made kind of, not this TikTok account specifically, but has made the rounds on kind of those Zillow feature accounts that just go through the photos of the listing and show these sometimes bizarre properties. And so anyway, she did this, and she really characterized it as like a prepper house, the people who are preparing to survive and then survive kind of like a disaster or an apocalypse, right? I mean, so think nuclear war, plague, I don't know. I'm not a prepper. I don't know what they're waiting for. I guess like the electric grid going down or Y2K at one point, stuff like that. And so people stockpile food and figure out a way to live self-sufficiently so they can live in a world that collapses, I guess. And so she characterized this house as that. And so that's kind of the idea we went in with, was like, oh, it's the prepper house. It's the bunker house. Now, the people who own it now are not preppers.
No, they are not.
But we can get into that later. But yeah, they are not preppers. They liked the property because it was so well built and a really unique, special place on 80 acres. And so they've owned it for 4 or 5 years now, and are selling it now. But yeah, they are not preppers, but they see why it could be a prepper house. I mean, the people that built it, they were the guy I talked to, his brother, and his son built it. Those 3 members of the Van Horn family built it after buying it kind of probably in the 70s. They spent a few years building it. And while, I had asked about the prepper thing, and he said, well, at that time we were thinking nuclear war. That was on everyone's mind. And so they didn't set out to build something for nuclear fallout potential, but they had a lot. I mean, it kind of became that. And so not only is the whole thing made out of concrete and rock, which is kind of a product of where it's built, but there's a cellar in the back that we went into, and it's like a tank in there that and then it's underground. And he said that was their bunker. So normally they used it as a root cellar, a food storage kind of place. But if, something were to happen, that was going to be their bunker, which, I mean, I think any place in that house would have, except for beside the windows.
Yeah,
I think anything in that house would be appropriate. Well, I don't know for sure, but I think, it's a good place to hunker down. But in addition to that, there are other things that could make it completely self-sufficient. So it is hooked up to the power grid, but there's a generator house that they built, and there's no longer a diesel generator in there, but there was that they could transfer to and have that run. There's also a really tall windmill that Jerry Van Horn said that it had actually worked at one point and it produced power. The blades are all in the corner of the generator house, and there's no blades up on the windmill because at one point a windstorm knocked them down, and no one, I guess, wanted to get back up. I mean, it's tall.
It's definitely tall. Looks very skinny too, I'd say.
Yeah. So anyway, it could be totally have its own power. It's heated by propane. The wood, the boilers, radiator along the floorboards, those are all hot water and heated by a propane wood boiler, but there is a wood backup. So if for some reason you can't get propane or you run out of propane, throw in some logs. There's 80 acres, lots of trees. You could heat up your house, hot water with wood. And every unit had a stone fireplace. So talking about redundancies, it's facing the south. So there's big windows in the front, low winter light would kind of the idea is, the sunlight come in the winter, heat up the stone and concrete, works kind of like a heat sink that you can get some warmth out of, even in the dead of winter, as long as the sun's out kind of thing. For water, there were 2 wells, one 500 feet deep. I'm guessing the other one must have been similar, but they, and you could toggle between the 2. So if one well wasn't working, use the other. Yeah. So they had everything kind of, and of course there's plenty of space to grow food if you need it. So they had kind of all these things in place, which made it possible to be self-sufficient.
And pretty defensible too.
Yeah, that's what we were joking about.
Walls of rocks.
So it was like, I was like, oh yeah, you could stand up here and defend your driveway if people were coming or through the woods or whatever.
It seems like a location that could be defended well in, like, say, Swiss Family Robinson.
Yeah.
Or that kind of style of defense, you know? And so, obviously, it seemed you kind of went over and how it's good for preppers, you know, and the ways that it could be self-sustaining, albeit maybe not like... There's a couple pieces missing, but like it could have been, obviously the diesel generator wasn't necessarily working or isn't there right now. But the bones are there. The bones are there. But was it as prepper-fied as you expected when we got there?
No, I think that we were all expecting more of those vibes, and they weren't there. I mean, it was more of like I think we kind of all talked. It was kind of a resort feel, you know, kind of dated. Sure, it was built in the 70s and 80s. Maybe interior maybe needs some updating, but it feels like a resort. You know, yeah, it wasn't that, you know, totally, you know, prepper vibe on the inside or even outside. I mean, that you can see how it would be used for that. That's what attracted John and Dave Allen, father and son owner of the property for the last 4 or 5 years, now selling it, but they are not preppers. And they said that they were just, I mean, it's a unique property with so much stone that they had each considered moving out there and making that their primary residence. They live nearby and ultimately are not going to move out there. They rented it out for a few years and are ready to pass it on to the next owner. But they said that just seeing it, how unique it is, I mean, there really is no other house like that probably in the region. So that's what attracted them to it. And then they saw this photo album that the family, the Van Horns, made documenting the construction of this home over several years. And it just shows how well built it was. You know, it's like, you know, concrete forms coming in. There's span creeks, so like long sections, you know, 20, 24 feet long probably of lengths of concrete that would come in on a truck, place it down as the floor and ceiling. I guess that's kind of what they use in hotels too. So it's like, you know, it's solid. And then there's that rock exterior. So it's concrete and rock. And there's, you know, they could see the water control that had gone in before, you know, they backfilled. And so they knew, you know, that it was, you know, despite being underground, was going to be, you know, not flooded. So that's what sold them on that, was seeing the construction process in those photos. And they were like, we want that photo album. So we paged through that as well. And that was cool to see. So.
And we actually have some sound to play here from John Allen to let him speak for himself about what drew them to the property.
Well, we said it was very unique. And then, you know, if you look at what you have here, to build something like this nowadays would just be astronomical cost involved with as much concrete and everything. Yeah. And then the labor with all the rock and all that. I mean, we knew it was a special property. So we thought, well, again, I think at first it was like, well, I might want to live here. But, you know, things change, life happens, and, you know, we went a different direction.
Okay, so we talked about why John and his father bought the property, but when you talk to the builders of the home, why did they sell it? Like, why did they move away from it, you know? Like, especially if they did have a prepper mindset about this, you know?
I
don't know?
No.
They didn't have an answer for that?
No. I think they just, this guy, I don't have an answer for that. Sorry.
No, you're good. I mean, maybe it's similar to why the current owners are selling it, you know? Yeah. I mean, I don't think that's what the entire reason they're selling. They did talk about how it's a lot to maintain.
It's a lot to maintain, yeah.
I mean, like that amount of property, was it, you said 80 acres? Like that's, and he said, I think he said on like using the big mowers or whatever, it still takes like 5 or so hours.
Yeah, with two 0-turn mowers, it takes like 4 or 5 hours. And then one person, I guess the former owners would take 12 hours. It's a lot to, I mean, you're not mowing 80 acres. There's a lot of wooded spots, and actually the little Amnicon River runs through, but I think it's a lot to maintain. So yeah, there were 3 people who had built it, at least 2 live in there. I think the guy I talked to had lived there for a little bit, but not recently. And yeah, so I don't know why they chose to sell, but the Allens said they tried the renting thing. It wasn't for them. They tried they considered moving out there, and their families are life changes, and it just wasn't for them and their families, and so they're not going to live out there permanently. They thought about VRBO, but it's like, oh, there's a lot of or a wedding venue, and then there's just a lot more that goes with kind of having those types of events or guests there. And so they're selling it. I mean, they bought it for, according to public records, like 300-something thousand. And then it's listed for just under $1 million right now. So it sounds like they're getting some interest, but it sounds like they're ready to move on. And despite, falling in love with the property when they first saw it.
Mm-hmm. And what is the kind of interest they're getting in the house right now? Obviously, besides TikTokers that are...
So TikTok did something, USA Today and the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel did something, the Daily Mail out of the United Kingdom did an article, we did one, and radio program or website, and maybe program as well. So I talked to the realtor, and she said that they're getting calls from like everywhere, even overseas. So sounds like there's a lot of interest in it. Really, that first week, I mean that TikTok came out within a week, I think, of the listing going live on March 1st, I think. So anyway, it was a ton of interest. There's still interest. They lowered the price a little bit, so it's under $1 million. But one thing that Dave, one of the current owners, said was, it would take millions to build this today. It would. I mean, materials and labor, especially, it'd be a lot. I mean, the family that built it did this themselves, but even then, I don't know what Spancrete costs, or it's going to be a lot. I mean, just a kitchen, is a lot. So a lot of these things would add up to millions. So they're hoping, someone will see that value, and whether, it's kind of being marketed a little bit with that prepper self-sufficient mindset there, but that's not just that. It's unique in other ways, and but you could be self-sufficient if you wanted.
Mm-hmm. And whoever gets it sounds like John seems to think that whoever takes it's got to have a little bit of creativity to how to use the space.
Again, I would expect, the right buyer from this, you'd have to have a lot of creativity, but you can do a lot with it, and make changes. And it does need updating.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see who ends up getting it and what they end up doing with it. I'd be curious to see if it ends up being like a Airbnb or a wedding venue or whatever,
Right. Or on the next season of Preppers or whatever that show is.
Or if it becomes more prepper-fied, because now it's the bones are there, so maybe they'll take it to the next level and actually make it a real prepper location now. And Jimmy, I mean, obviously this is cool, unique, and especially when you go into this certain expectation, shocking. But what is it about it, do you think, kind of, I don't know, in a way screams Northlandia in a way?
I mean, any house that is unique, I think people are interested in. But it's the fact that it looks like a fortress. It's built underground. It's made out of stone. Just looking at it, it's like, oh, cool. And then to kind of hear the backstory of the family that built it themselves, it was pretty cool too. So yeah, it's odd on its surface, but there's a lot more to it than that, right? And I think that kind of fits the Northlandia oddity, but also interesting. More to it than just that, right?
Mm-hmm. And it's also literally off the beaten path. It's not in a public. It's not in a well-trodden area. It literally is the end of this dead-end road.
Right. It's technically in the town of Oakland, in Douglas County, Wisconsin. The address is South Range, so near South Range. I don't know. I hadn't heard of Oakland before. I've been in Duluth for 11 years, but I am not from the area.
I've been here pretty much my entire life, and I wasn't aware of Oakland.
Yeah, so it's kind of one of those townships that you don't hear the name of, but everything postal out there is South Range. So.
All right, Jimmy. Well, I think we'll wrap up there. Thank you again so much for joining us. It was fun to go on to venture out there, and to find weird stuff like this.
Yeah, let's find some more weird stuff.
Let's do it. And thank you for joining us in this venture into Northlandia. To read the article for this week's column, as well as watch a video produced by myself and photos by Jed Carlson, visit duluthnewstribune.com/topics/Northlandia. If you enjoy this podcast and would like to support us, consider becoming a subscriber of the Duluth News Tribune at duluthnewstribune.com/subscribe. Join us again next time and discover the extraordinary stories that you just might miss if you're on the right place at the right time, ready to step off the beaten path with no rush to return, here in Northlandia.